Let's get into our conversation for today now. According to the latest inflation report released by the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's headline inflation rate for January 2024 surged to 29.9%, marking a significant increase from the 28.92% recorded in the previous month. This increment explains a heightened rise in the average price level for January 2024 against December, an indication of growing inflationary pressure within the nation's economy. Recall President Tinubu recently met with the state governors to channel their effort to increase local food production. And to discuss this, I'm joined by the CEO of Finance with Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. He joins me virtually now. Thank you. It's good to see you. Mr. Mohammed, it's good to see you again.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah. Well, the January 2024 inflation rose to 29.9% from 28.92% previously. This is despite various measures by the federal government to tame inflation. How close or far is the CBN from winning the war against inflation? Let's start from there.
And first of all, Frank, you should also know that the war against inflation is not a global war. It's not just happening in Nigeria alone. You know, the United States, the United Kingdom also have released the inflationary, the CPI. Also, you saw that price of goods, especially food and housing, has also made inflation in those places go high. So it's a global problem, and we have to look for a solution. Why they have moved from a height of about 10% to the US is doing about 2.9 and the UK is about 4%. We are still moving higher and higher and higher. We've done 29 points. So we need to begin to look at how we can solve this problem, because our own problem is multidimensional. Because when I say multidimensional, we have the cost of production, we have microeconomy, induced inflation, we have cost of production induced inflation, we have market demand and supply induced inflation, and we've added FX volatility induced inflation. So our own challenges are different from their own challenges, and so we begin to look at how we can address some of these challenges that are look more like not in our own hands, but we have to look at ways to handle those inflationary pressure that we are seeing.
I get the point that this is a global issue. It's not only Nigeria that is facing this, but let's look at our own peculiar, challenge here. I know you mentioned quite a lot of issues earlier, excess volatility, induced inflation, and other causes of inflation. But for Nigeria particularly, how do we, prevent or shore up against any other, perhaps any other external impact that is coming from abroad or elsewhere? And what does this increase portend for the Nigerian economy? Bear in mind that the federal government has in the past rolled out different measures.
Well, the measures they are ruling out is not enough yet, because when you talk about food, the highest cause of inflation in Nigeria now become food. So that has to do with the supply chain, and also supply chain also come with its own constraint. You remember the insecurity is still there. Then you also remember that cost of transportation has skyrocketed. Also, machines have also gone up because some of these machines are imported into this country, and also even when the spare parts of some of these transportation vehicles have also gone up. So there's a lot of power is not stable also, so we need to battle that also. So those are the challenges that the government will need to deal with. That's why I said our own condition is different from their own. Remember, like I said, those were doing about double digit, now they have come to single digit. But we, as we are now, we are still struggling to see how we can get to that single, even not going to just maintain that single digit and then see how we can improve upon it. Yeah, like you said, what can government do now? Frank, the major challenge government has to do is how to deal with FX, because some of the household items, some of the commodities that we normally make use of in this country are being imported into this country. So when you have those importation of these goods into these countries, then when FX becomes a problem, then you need to address it. One major area I think the government should do is to address FX supply in the area of the supply side. And also we have to come back face reality, especially with the government. when it has to has to do with import duties. You cannot arbitrarily continue to fix import duty based on the floating of the naira, and you expect that cost of goods and services will go down when you know fully well that most of the goods and services that we patronize in this country comes outside the shore of this country. So they will definitely put those charges back to the consumer. So government need to take a bite also. Some of their revenue, government need to begin to look at ingenious ways of addressing some of these problems, like I said, an homegrown way. But the major thing that is driving inflation in Nigeria, especially food inflation, is FX volatility. Because when you look at it, if some people will say that, oh no, do we import gari, do we import it? But I'll tell you that, what about the machineries that we use to make sure cassava become gari? Do we manufacture it in this country? What about the cars that are going to move these goods from point A to point B? Do we manufacture it in this country? When those cars break down, how much is the spare part of those cars? So there are a lot of things that are becoming like a supply chain constraint that government need to address. Government need to intervene now. That intervention, I'm still thinking, how do you intervene? Before now, we used to have agricultural cooperative banks. We don't have those banks again, whereby the farmers were able to come as cooperative and they go to those places and make sure they get loan as cooperative. They make sure these loans are paid back. But now we don't have such things. So it's a big challenge. Government need to look at it, take a bite of some of these issues in terms of revenue. Because again, what the government think at this moment is that we want revenue. But what is revenue without the people? The people are the ones that makes the government. And if the people are suffering and the government is getting revenue, how do the people survive? And again, I think we concentrate so much on the federal government. We have left the state out of it. We just feel that this problem is a Tinubu problem. Tinubu, we have to solve this problem. We have forgotten that since he came to power, state have received high terms of allocation for the federal.
Okay. Pardon me to jump in here, Mr. Mohammed. Specifically,
not just concentrate.
Okay, just pardon me to jump in here. The NBS report specifically highlighted some commodities as key drivers of this inflationary pressure. They mentioned bread is one of them, cereals, yam, potatoes, and other tubers among others. Some have called on the president to bring these commodities in, perhaps by way of importation, which the president said is not an option for now. So what are your recommendations to increasing supply for these essential food commodities?
I think if the president is saying it's not an option for the federal government to bring in these things now to manage this inflation, I think he should look at it as an option in the short term. Then if it's not going to be, federal government not going to be involved with it directly, then they should need to take a bite of the tariff of some of these household items. That's what I think they should do. They should begin to look at the tariff, bring down this tariff. Kenya did it. Kenya realized that, okay, most of the goods that we consume in our country are imported. So if we want to drive down inflation, we need to bring down tariffs. The point, they suspended tariff in some of the household products that they know that their citizens really need. And also they went further after putting a price commodity board that makes sure that, okay, we have brought down these rates, so you need to sell it at this because you are not paying duty at this. They force the proper monitoring system. And Kenya inflation moved from a height of about 22% to a low of about 17% within the shortest possible time. So we need to begin to look at that, and the government will need to look at. If you look at cereal, you know that cereal mostly is not for adults, it's for children. So you don't manufacture enough here. So if you have to manufacture in this country, the cost of production is even more expensive than what you bring into this country. So I know why the president is saying, no, that's not idea, because they want to build an homegrown. They want the home or economy, those that can produce here to make to be able to function. But as it stands now, they cannot meet our demand. So you need to think of other strategies. And one of those easily comes is to make this importation of this food, which are already being done. But I think what the president should do is, if we have to do one thing is to bring down the tariff on the importation of these goods. Instead of us doing that 1,500, you could go to, after the CBN governor have told us that our naira as it stands is undervalued. So let them import based on the true value of the naira. and so that this cost of some of these goods will come down, and we have a temporary repress whereby we begin to develop our own sector of that economy to be able to compete globally. We should not always be thinking of, oh, we need to compete locally. No, we should always think of global. And when we start thinking globally, then that is when we begin to add value to what we are producing, not just producing in anyhow that not have value outside the shore of this country. That, for me, is the way to go.
So it would seem primarily food is the major driver of inflation in Nigeria at the moment. Let's talk about the recent meeting between the governor and the president. They met to address the challenge, especially that the country is facing. Several steps were taken or were discussed, and one of them was to have the state increase food production. So do the states have the resources to share this burden with the federal government? Do they have the money?
Frank, I just told you that they have the money now. They may not have it before, but they have the money now. It may not be as much. Let me give you an instance. How many states have improved on their minimum wage in spite of this hardship? Many states have come up with palliative for their civil servants in spite of this hardship. No. Everybody's just talking about the federal government, federal government, federal government, federal government, federal government, federal government. Nobody is looking at the states. The state has a role to play. There was a time that Lagos State had to partner with Kebbi State to bring the rice to Lagos. Why are we not seeing that partnership within states? You're talking about tuber of yams. You're talking about yam. Who is the food basket of Nigeria? It's Benue State. Why are they not be able to produce enough yams to the economy? It's because of the insecurity. So why can't we come together and address those insecurity problems and states say, look, we are going to help you address this insecurity, but when you start, once those are settled, they bring this yam to our states. So there's no state in Nigeria that cannot be able to deal with this issue if they want to. They should be bringing in the states. You talk about remember the president talked about the release strategic green reserve for Nigerians. Up to this moment, no state has done that. No state we've seen. That means it's only the federal government that have been having strategic green reserve. No state do have. So it's a major challenge because the state need to partner with the federal government. And I totally agree that the state need to be partner with the federal government in addressing these issues that we are going through now.
Because I was going to ask you, what measure would the state come in? Because we're looking at the short term now. Perhaps if you talk about the long term, maybe we can look in the direction, look in the way of state coming in. But in the shortest possible time, what can the state do? Yes, you've talked about the fact that they have the funds and all of that. But how do they even come in at this time? It's another question entirely. Perhaps it's a puzzle that they have to go back and solve.
You see, they could come in and begin to look at social investments. I think a point, I was here in Lagos State, there's a market, like a weekend market that Lagos State is setting up to reduce commodities price for if you go to those market weekends, the price of some of these goods comes down. Those are measures they can put in place. They also should be involved in talking to the farmers directly. Maybe Lagos State is involved in making sure that when these products are harvested from those farms, they are moved directly to Lagos. Those are part of it. And then you know that some of the challenges that some of the farmers have is in the movement in terms of tariff that they pay when they are bringing these goods. And some of those tariffs come from local government, from other fees. State can intervene and say, you know what, if they are bringing any food item in this into our state, it's free from every tariff. And so that will force food prices to go down. But in a situation whereby everything is left in the hands of the federal government to propose solution to it, I don't think it will get out of the wood if we continue to do that. We need to involve the state, and the state should also look at ways of subsidizing agriculture, especially the states that are agricultural, we will call it agricultural producing states. How are you helping farmers to get loan for a single digit? Like what, even if we don't have the agricultural cooperative bank, why can't we have farmers form cooperative and government begin to intervene by giving them loan on a single digit so that the cost of goods will come down? Because when you have to borrow for a double digit, you pass those fees to the consumer. So that, for me, I think that's where state should come in. take a bite of these taxes, illegal taxes or taxes that some of these farmers will have to pay to bring in their products into the country, and also look at where you can subsidize them for them to have single-digit inflation. I mean, single-digit fund, so that will bring down the cost of production, and that will in turn result in market price going down.
Let's look at some of the states again. Let's dwell on the state for a while. You mentioned Benue, which of course is one of the food producing states. So what about all the other states? And if we look at each of these states, especially in the north and southwest, what state do you think has the strength in what to produce? We have, of course, tuber. For Benue State, we know that they are very good with yam and all of that. Up north there, you have grain, wheat, and I mean, rice farming and all of that. But if you look at the southwest here, I mean, what kind of produce or farm produce can they complement what is coming from the up north or what is coming from the central?
Well, I think when you look at a state like Lagos State, we say the aquatic splendor of Nigeria, and then we look at fishery. A lot of Lagos is surrounded with a lot of water. How much of that have we been able to curve in and make sure that we become the heart of fishery? That's another thing that Lagos State will have to look at, like a state like Lagos. You can, if you go down, you see the fishermen all over, but they don't really have the good technology to even be able to do those fishery that they are doing very well. We need to look at that. A state like Lagos, let me tell you, Dubai do not produce anything, but they reduce taxes and everything all over the world comes to Dubai. So you don't have to be a state that will have to be producing, oh, I'll produce this, so that no, you could also begin to say, okay, any goods that comes into our state is tax-free. You have this incentivize, just do incentives for some of these products to come in. Every state will not just come up and want to set up their own farm to be producing this and producing that. That will cause chaos, because no state can be an island of itself. You must look at your peculiar condition and look at your competitive advantage and then begin to apply it. That's, for me, that's what I think some states do. All the states cannot just go in and be saying, oh, we want to do this, want to do that. But look at ways that you can adapt. Like I just gave an example of Dubai. Dubai do not produce everything, but every food is cheap in Dubai because they've reduced tariff, they've come up with a lot of incentives. Those are what some states will need to do. You don't have to start producing because you want to meet needs. Lagos State, as it stands now, do not have to start to say, we want to set up a rice farm because we want to make sure that we're beginning to produce rice. Well, you don't need that. Then partner with KB State. And when you partner with KB State, what are you doing with KB State? You say, okay, KB State, any of these goods that come into our country, they are free from all the taxes that we collect in the market and bring down the price. So you don't have to go and set up your own farm. You just need to be innovative enough to know what are your competitive advantage. For a state like Lagos, your competitive advantage is the population that you have. Your competitive advantage is the number of businesses that are here. You don't want them to go into, oh, let's go and start farming. But if you talk of food processing, you know that Lagos is the hub in terms of food processing. So again, you could also look at that. Bring in the raw food here, we'll process it for you, and it will come with value added to it, and also will reduce tariff. So those are ways that you can begin to do all those things. So you don't have to go and set up your own farm, begin to produce like Benue State, oh, want to start producing yam here. No. I think we need to think of our competitive advantage.
So in a nutshell, perhaps we need to look at the competitive advantage for each of the states across the Federation. Well, on this note, I want to thank you so much for your time, Mukhtar Mohammed, CEO of Finance Week. Mukhtar, thank you for coming on Business Nigeria. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thank you, Frank.